So, today you guys are going to hear a really rare occurrence. Our Dean, Pearl Sullivan, and Sam Altman are going to be speaking in a rare fireside chat. Pearl Sullivan is the Dean of Engineering at the University of Waterloo, and she's the first woman to hold the post here at the University of Waterloo. She was the chair of the Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering Department from 2006 until 2008. And she was the founding director of the university's collaborative graduate program in nanotechnology within the faculties of engineering and science. Her vision for the next year is to change the way we teach engineers of the future. And as a student, I gotta say, she's doing a really, really good job. Sam Altman was in the first cohort of Y Combinator. And Y Combinator is a seed accelerator based in the San Francisco Bay Area in the heart of Silicon Valley. Y Combinator, named one of the top startup incubators of Forbes in 2014, has helped launch hundreds of successful companies, including Reddit, Airbnb, and Dropbox. And I'm sure you guys know all of those. In February 2014, Sam was named the president of Y Combinator, and that's a big deal. This month, Sam launches an online course at Stanford that describes a one-class business school course for people who want to learn how to start startups. Some of his speakers include Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, and Marissa Mayer. So let's give a warm welcome to Pearl and Sam.
So good morning, everyone. How are you doing today, this morning? Very good? Well, we have a real treat this morning. We have Sam Altman from Silicon Valley.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to University of Waterloo, Heck the North, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Sam, how does Y Combinator work?
Well, we figured out that we could fund people that knew how to build things but didn't know how to build a business and give them a little bit of capital and a lot of advice. And some big percentage of the time have it work out. So we funded now 720 startups. We fund them twice a year. Mike?
Yeah, it's not on. Switched off. Tight jeans.
Seems so. Yeah?
There we go.
That's
All right.
good.
So we fund them twice a year, and we give them as many resources as we can to be successful. And we have a very tight community with a lot of people from Waterloo, which is awesome. And we sort of have this community that supports these startups, and the startups use each other, and they give each other advice, and a lot of the alumni invest in each other, and that's how we work. We really just try to create as many successful startups as we can.
That's great. So what makes a successful entrepreneur?
So this is a hard question. The trait that correlates the most with success is determination. There are a lot more good ideas than there are people that are willing to put in the years of pain that it takes to execute them well. So that, if I had to pick only one trait, you would say determination. If you could expand it to a second, I think you would say a clear vision. The good entrepreneurs have something. They're very mission-oriented. They're not starting a startup for the sake of the startup. They want to build a specific product. They feel like this needs to exist in the world, and it doesn't. And then if you added a third, I would say intelligence. But surprisingly, that's the third.
That's great. And let's say I'm an 18-year-old student, just got into University of Waterloo, made a few good friends, and I have a startup idea. So what do you suggest I should do to prepare for starting a startup?
I actually don't think that you should try and start a startup and be a student at the same time. This has somehow become popular recently, but it usually ends up that you do a bad job being a student and a bad job starting a startup. Starting a startup takes like 110% of your time. You really can't do much else. Even the entrepreneurs that try and do something else while they're starting their startup, be an angel investor on the side or whatever. You do usually fail at both most of the time. But certainly being a student is like way too much of a time commitment. So what I would say is if the thing to do, there's no pre-med equivalent. There's no pre-startup, What you want to do as a student is learn to hack, meet potential co-founders, and learn how to think about ideas. And worry about those, and then either start a startup after college, or if there's something you feel compelled to do, you can leave college and do it now. But I think most people probably are better off finishing school. But those three things, when we talk to people that are, say, between 25 and 35 about what they most miss, the number one thing they always say is the pool of potential co-founders, and that I wish when I were in college I had time to, I had spent more time meeting potential co-founders, because then I could be starting companies with these people now. So working on projects with people, learning how to build things, learning how to think about what to build, and meeting people to work with. That's what I would say you should do.
That's great. So what Sam Altman's saying is, don't quit school. Okay. So let's say you're just about to graduate, and you think a pretty good idea, and all your co-founders are saying, that's not a bad idea. So what are the three most important things that I should think of in my early stages of a startup?
Well, there's a bunch of detailed mechanical things, but those are all on the internet, so I'll leave those out. The first thing, one thing that's become popular, especially sort of in the hackathon world recently, is to sort of say, you know what, ideas don't matter, and we're going to pivot, and it's going to be fine, and it's cool to pivot a bunch of times. But if you look at the really big, really successful companies, they generally are successful in the direction of their founding idea. And so it is actually worth thinking really hard about, is this a good idea? And the reason this is hard is that good ideas are not obvious. What you want as a startup is if there's a Venn diagram, and over here looks like a really bad idea, and over here is in fact a good idea, you want this little tiny intersection. Because if it's an obviously good idea, it's not good for a startup. But it means that the best ideas, your parents and your friends, will tell you, wow, that looks like a really bad idea. So the thing to remember is that you're trying to build value over a 10-year period. So you want something that is not some little trend now where you can arbitrage the market, but you want to build something that somehow, in 10 years is going to have a durable competitive advantage and billions of dollars of revenue. And I think most people skip that part of the evaluation. They don't really think about is this idea going to be long-term valuable, and is it not obvious to others, because otherwise it's have brutal competition on day one. The second thing to think about is, are these the people I want to start a company with? Most of the blow-ups that we have at Y Combinator in the early days are because the co-founders decide they hate each other, or one sucks, or they can't work together. We had this amazing statistic a couple of years ago where people that brought on a co-founder they didn't already know, just for the purpose of doing YC, there were 9 of those in one batch, and 6 months later, all 9 of those had fallen apart. So I don't think people spend enough time thinking about their relationship with their co-founder at the beginning, because that usually blows things up. And then the third is is this the thing I want to spend the next 10 years of my life on? Startups take a really long time. A lot of people say, well, I'm not that excited about this, but I'm only going to do it for 2 or 3 years, and I'm going to make enough money to go do this thing that I am excited about. But it will either fail or take far longer than 2 or 3 years. And so it really is worth thinking hard about, is this the thing? The track record, this is also somewhat popular in the hackathon community, I'd say. This idea that I'm going to do something to make a lot of money in 2 or 3 years and then do what I really want to do. And the question I always ask is, why not just do what you really want to do now? And no one ever has a good answer to that. So real thought about, is this what I want to do?
Great. So Sam, YC has helped hundreds of new companies. Yeah. And a lot of programming is happening at your site. So do you have separate programming for software versus hardware startups?
No. In this last batch, we had 87 companies. 2 of them were building nuclear reactors. 3 of them were doing synthetic biology. One of them was building a quantum computer. About 10 of them were traditional consumer hardware, probably about 50 that looked like traditional software companies. And we put those all through the same program. And the reason is, most startups that fail in the hardware world fail because they don't look enough like a software company. What you want to do is figure out the smallest subset of the problem that you can and build a fully functional version of that that you actually can sell to some user. And most hardware startups don't go about it this way. And most hardware startups take like 1.5 years, 2 years longer to ship, which is often just a fatal wound. So we hold startups, no matter what they're building, to the same discipline of having something that they can build and get in customers' hands in 3 months.
Great, it's a short time. Okay, so I'm thinking of going to Y Combinator.
Good.
I got my air ticket, I'm all excited, and I'm going to line up to see Sam Altman. Okay, so is there a key insight about the lifestyle that I could be having and before I come to see you, and is something that you think people like me should come and think more about and understood before coming and applying to Y Combinator?
You know, the big thing that we see people get wrong the most often is not thinking about the why. You know, they thought a lot about how they're going to start a startup, how they're going to get into YC, but they don't have a good answer to why they want to start a startup or why they want to do YC. And if there's one thing that we want to like run as far away from as we possibly can, it's people that are doing YC or starting a startup to check off a resume box. It's bad for us, it's bad for them. You're definitely going to fail if that's the reason. And so we see this a lot in made-up startup ideas, people that are starting a startup for the sake of that. So like, remember, the cool thing about YC, it comes up every 6 months. If you don't have an idea that you actually want to work on right now or a co-founder you actually want to work with, like, wait for that to happen. Do it the next batch. Like, the YC story is just full of people that you know, applied with some like bad made-up idea because they wanted to start a startup, and then came back 6 months later with a real idea that they actually wanted to do. And we funded them that second time. Drew Housen, actually, of Dropbox, applied with a made-up idea. We rejected him. The next batch, he came back with Dropbox. We said, OK. That was really good for him. So I think, yeah, the thing is to think about, like, do you really want to do this, or are you doing this because it sounds cool to start a startup?
Okay, great. So what should Canadian startups do better, be better at to be competitive?
You know, I was just talking with someone about this right before coming on stage, and because I don't even know which people are Canadian and not NYC. Like, I don't even keep track of that. So I asked, and the answer that was given to me is that they need this. I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this. I guess I'm like probably one of the few Americans here. Maybe I can say this. Yeah, all right. Well, they said that Canadian founders should learn to act more like asshole Americans. And I think what hopefully that meant is that you know, one of the things that works about startups is you are allowed to sort of you know, you can have like grand ambitious plans, and people will take you seriously. And you don't have to like be meek and be like ask for people's permission and like go. You can just like say, hey, like, I'm running this company, we're going to be this multi-billion-dollar thing, and you need to treat me like that, and I'm going to like do this, and I'm not going to, you know, like, if I'm going to tell me this is a bad idea, I'm going to do it anyway. You know, you offer me a bad deal, I'm going to say no. So I think the Canadian startups that we funded, we've been extraordinarily happy with. By the way, I get invited to speak at about 150 things a week. I always say no, and yet, like, here I am on the weekend because the people we've gotten from Waterloo are just awesome.
Thank you. Great.
But we've been super, super happy with the team we funded from here.
So just a little check here. How many of you are from the United States? Wonderful.
Oh, a lot.
Welcome. Welcome. Great, a lot of Americans here. Okay, so YC itself is an ecosystem, a huge network. Really, it's a global network. So what are some of the key elements of the YC ecosystem? Why does it work so well?
Well, let's see. So one is that it's just because we're the first investor in these companies and because we put the companies together through this intensive process, there's a huge amount of camaraderie among the companies. So if you're a YC company and you ask some other YC company to buy your software or beta test it or use it, they will almost certainly say yes or introduce you to an investor.
Okay.
We have events and conferences. Actually, for the first time this May, we're taking all YC alumni ever to a conference. We're just going to have like a 2-day just with YC companies. We have spaces in San Francisco and in Mountain View where the companies can hang out. We have online mailing lists. We have some new online tools that are coming out. We have like a private social network. And there's a lot of sort of other things that we do. We have sort of like lists where people can get connected to investors or customers, and we have sort of people will come in and just meet with YC companies to partner with them. So we really try and think about the services that these companies want.
Great.
And help them.
So you support them and you keep them in the network even
yeah.
after they've graduated.
Yeah, we spend
That's
more
great.
time with companies after they graduate than before.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so I heard that you're launching a new startup class at
Yes.
Stanford next week. So tell us more about it.
So the idea is that at YC, we do these dinners once a week where we invite these well-known experts on startups to come and just give a talk. And founders have told us that that's really, really helpful, and they learn a lot, way more than they do in like a startup structured class. So we thought it would be cool to just take some of these best speakers and have them talk about their areas of expertise, and then make it available online. So it'll be just that. It'll be here's
Great.
a way to learn about startups.
Great. I'm going to go online.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So one last question before I open it to the floor. So where are the best technology ideas coming from, do you think?
Students, honestly.
Great.
Yeah, if you look at the history of tech, the really transformative companies, most of the time get started by people in their, when they're in university plus 5 years, something like that. Like the people that have the best sense of sort of like the new major trends tend to be fairly young.
Great. Okay, so open up for questions. Now, I think we should get to know you, okay? So if you want to ask a question, please give your name and where do you come from, and then please ask the question. Go ahead, sir. Way back there.
Hi, my name is Mark. I study at the University of Waterloo. My question is just how much do you think the word of starting a startup classes or online tutorials or different YouTube videos how much would that have to learn actually starting?
So the question is, how much can you learn about startups by sort of studying them? I think it's about like 30%. Something like that. Which is still a lot when you think about it, and it means that it's definitely worth doing. Because if you take the time to do it, you will at least not make a lot of mistakes or make them less painfully. But most of the other 70 is you just have to do it, and you learn these things that are you just learn by doing.
Okay, who else? All right, yes?
I'm Austin from Michigan. What are the common traits you see of companies that fail? How have you seen companies go wrong?
Well, common traits of companies that fail. I'll give you the immediate causes because those are sort of interesting, and then talk about how they get there. Companies mostly fail because they never make something that users want. And they also fail when they run out of money, and they also fail when the founders give up. So those are sort of like the three common ways that companies fail. One of those three things, or often all at the same time, happen. But the question is, how do they get there, right? Like, no one goes out trying to make something that everyone doesn't want, and no one tries to run out of money. And so the things that bad founders do that get them there, one is they're delusional in a bad way. You want to be somewhat delusional about your prospects of success, but you don't want to look at 2 months of cash left in the bank and assume that something magical is going to happen. You don't want to look at plummeting user metrics with no retention and assume that that's someday going to turn around. And so founders that are able to maintain incredible self-discipline about looking at what's actually happening, being very honest about the metrics of the business, they actually succeed incredibly often. So like if, you know, like let's say it's true that 90% of startups fail, but I don't think it's that high. Like I bet, and that means, you know, you would say like I have a 9 out of 10 chance of failing. But I bet if you can just be like extremely disciplined, which is hard to do, about what's really going on, you have like a 1 in 3 shot, something like that. It's a huge difference. And so building something people want is hard, but it's doable. And if you're really disciplined about looking at what's going on and you make this really tight feedback loop, you know, you can get there a lot of the time.
Great. So gentleman in the red shirt.
I'm Edwin. I'm a high school student as well. Companies like Pebble were head-to-head with big dogs like Google and Apple who have tons of money for advertising and whatnot. How do you think they should go ahead and push themselves forward to not get crushed?
So, you know, the history of tech here would suggest that Pebble has a good shot. This is the exact moment where what is likely to happen in the popular opinion of what is likely to happen get the most divorced. So like everyone, Eric is here somewhere. Everyone's like, oh, like Pebble like sucks, like it's gonna like get crushed by Apple, crushed by Google. And yet, like if you talk to people that actually use it, they love Pebble. I myself love Pebble, and people talk about why Pebble does something really well that you know, these like other platforms don't do. Honestly, what it reminds me of is when Apple launched the iPhone and Steve Ballmer was like, that iPhone is awful, it's never gonna sell. You know, we have like 30 devices and they're so great. When major new markets come on board, when sort of like, you know, new computing paradigms happen, it has traditionally been a new company that wins, not one of the old ones adapting. So, you know, it's in any specific case, the details matter so much you can't predict it, but generally speaking, when there's like a huge tectonic shift in how computing happens, new companies emerge and win because they understand something the big companies don't, and they have this singular focus that lets startups win.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Yes?
So the question is, what do you do differently for a product that has like a mission critical function? Yeah, you definitely cannot release them as fast, but most of the time founders still use this as an excuse to move way too slowly. So yes, you know, you'll need more testing, you'll need to do some things differently. But when we have companies like this, you know, when we have like companies that are injecting human blood with, you know, like, there are usually ways that you can still move much faster than you would think without actually injecting additional risk into the system. And the usual way to do it is make your product simpler. And there's just less surface area for something to go wrong.
Okay. So one last question. The gentleman in the back, blue and striped shirt. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you talk a little louder?
The person at the back? Yeah. Can you speak
Yeah,
louder,
you.
please?
So the thing about risk is that almost everyone miscalibrates it terribly, one way or the other. Like humans are just very, very bad at evaluating risk. And so the things that people think are really risky, like starting a company, sounds like crazy risky to start a company while you're in middle school, right? Like no one would ever do that. But the question I always like to ask is, why is it risky? Like, what is the specific risk? Don't tell me that like it seems risky. Tell me like exactly what's going to go wrong and why it might happen. And you know, for things like that, you know, you kind of go down that rabbit hole and you're like, well, if it doesn't, you know, work, I just like keep focusing on school. or like I miss some time to socialize or whatever, I don't think it's that risky to work on something you're excited about. You're guaranteed. I'd say you're nearly guaranteed to learn more, like working on a startup than you are in like an average middle school class. And so in that sense, it's not that risky. And in terms of like an acceptable amount of risk to take, again, it's probably like if you're just doing this and see, if you think about it as building a project and not building a company, I'd say the risk is very low. And that's probably the right way to think about it anyway. I'll be around this afternoon
Great.
if we didn't get to
So
you.
Sam has office hours at University of Waterloo. Everybody heard that? Yeah. Sam, I want to say thank you so much from Waterloo Engineering, Hack the North, University of Waterloo, for taking your time to come here. We just appreciate it so much. And for everyone, Mr. Sam Altman.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We're doing a panel of some YC alumni from Waterloo. I think they're all from Waterloo. I'm not in the panel. Oh. What? Okay. So to start, wow, it's fun to see all of you guys. Eric, I guess we'll start with you. Can you just introduce yourself, talk about how you got started and what you do?
Sure. My name is Eric Wojciechowski. I started a company called Pebble. We make smartwatches. I started it here at the University of Waterloo. I was in systems design engineering. A couple of you guys. It's good. There's a lot more buildings now than when I was at school. I worked on it as a fourth-year project, sort of an evolution of a fourth-year project. Did Velocity during the very first term of Velocity, and ended up working on it for about 2 or 3 years here in Waterloo. Got into Y Combinator, moved down to the Valley in 2001.
Hey guys. Hey, so I won't speak as loudly. My name is Eric. I also studied at Waterloo here. I studied math, and I dropped out actually my first year. And contrary to what the dean was saying earlier, I went down to San Francisco and I met Logan, who's my co-founder at Thinking Ape. We built mobile games. About 4 years ago, we were, hacking code in our living room in San Francisco, and we were probably making a few $100 a day selling games that we were building. Last year, we made, I think, maybe $15 million selling games. And so today we're one of the top grossing mobile developers on iOS and Android.
All right, I'm Wilkins. As Eric mentioned, I'm one of his co-founders. I went to Waterloo as well, back a long time ago. Like
Maybe we can spread out a little bit.
Yeah, so back in 2005, studied computer engineering. They didn't have computer science back then. Or sorry, software engineering. They had computer science.
Yet to be invented.
Yeah. Yeah, so I took a more traditional route. I graduated. I went down and worked for Amazon for 2 years, and then I went down to the Valley and started a company. Kind of when I started, I started with one of my other co-founders, Kenshi, and we always had a desire to build what we initially wanted to build, which was a company called Chatters. It was a communication platform. And we had a mentality that we wanted to build it no matter what. We knew we were going to quit at some point and build this product, but we were fortunate enough to get into YC, and that kind of moved our timetable up a bit. So we went down in 2008 and started the company. I definitely echo what Sam said. You really want to be working on something you truly believe in, and not just trying to make something up. I think you'll enjoy it a lot more, and it really doesn't feel like work when you're working on something that you like.
Hey everybody, my name is Michael Litt. I'm the co-founder of Vidyard. We were in YC summer of 2011. I'm actually a Kitchener-Waterloo native. I went to engineering here and graduated in 2011. And we actually went to YC this summer immediately after graduating. And the company, Vidyard, is essentially the development of our fourth-year design project. And so my co-founder, Devin, who I met during undergrad, actually drove out to, or flew out to California to meet me during a work term. And we drove back to Kitchener together from California, and we started thinking about the idea for this business, which was to make videos for companies to help explain their products. And so we were going to make these videos, and we started that business during our fourth year, but ultimately found that companies needed a way to host those videos online, track the engagement of those assets. And we figured if we developed some really cool software, we could actually track how people engage with those videos, and then ultimately sell them a guarantee alongside of a video that 60% of their audience would watch the content until the very end. And my brother and I bought a house in town, which Eric Mijakowski moved into, and in the back room started building these watches with high school talent from WCI. And he went to this program called Y Combinator, and raved about it, thought it was really cool, and I actually slept in his bed that he left behind during that whole time, and so I kind of osmosed. And during that period, he recommended we apply, and we didn't think we were a good fit. We were a B2B technology, but we were building this company come hell or high water, and we were already making some revenue, and so we applied with a video of the three founders actually talking about our technology, and we could actually see when the partners watched the video and know they did not watch the entire product. But we had a conversation about that interview, and were accepted into Y Combinator. So our timeline was development during fourth year. Waterloo's unique in that they don't take any IP in what you build during undergrad. And systems is awesome because you can actually aggregate all of your fourth year courses together to build a product that you can then commercialize after you graduate, and that's exactly what we did.
My name is Stephen Lake. So I'm I guess the young one on the panel here a bit. I'm a 2012 grad from Waterloo Mechatronics. I started a company with two really good friends of mine, two of my best friends, classmates from Mechatronics, Aaron and Matt. And so we had been in school together for all 5 years, like literally took almost every class together, lived in Europe together on exchange, et cetera, worked on a bunch of projects. One of those projects in fourth year was this wearable device for the blind. So it was this belt-worn thing with a big laser on the front that would scan for like obstacles in front of you and translate that to tactile feedback so the blind kind of feel their way around in the world. And the project got us really interested in this whole idea of like merging humans and technology and what we can do with the power of technology and sensors and combining that with people. Brought us to the forefront of the research in the field and realized that one of the big challenges in actually turning like wearable computers and wearable tech into reality was the interface that we used to interact with these devices, such as smart glasses and the Google glasses in the future. And so we chose to kind of work on that little problem as we graduated in May 2012 and try and solve that interface challenge of like how do we interact with the next generation of computers and these new form factors of computers. And so we had this idea for a product which we now call Myo, but the idea was if we could detect all of the electrical activity from the muscles in your arm, we should be able to detect all of your hand and finger motions and then use that as this like wearable input to interact with the digital world. And so I had this idea. We spent the first few months after graduating in the Velocity garage down in Kitchener, hacking on like the very first prototypes of this, and we had these crude, like horrible prototypes that were boxes like this and wired over USB to the computer, and you have to like shave the hair off your arm and apply conductive gel and put on these electrodes and stuff like that. But finally, after about 4 or 5 months of building prototypes, we had something that sort of worked, and we could actually control PowerPoint by flicking your arm back and forth, and like proved out the sort of core concept behind it was possible. And then with that, kind of on the advice of Mike, and then also Mike McCauley, another Waterloo grad by Combinator, applied to YC in December 2012. We're fortunate enough to go down and get accepted to the interview there, and then joined YC in winter 2013, so just over a year ago now, but a year and a half ago, and kind of gone from there. So,
what do you guys wish you had known when you were students here? What would you tell current students about what they should do if they want to start a startup someday?
How much fun it is to work at a startup? I managed to get through 6 co-op terms and only work at a startup, and it was only like sort of a startup for one of those. If I had worked at more startups during my 5 or 6 co-op terms, I would have started the company way sooner with way more of a network built in. when I started the company in 4th year, I was just then starting to get into the startup community. I was meeting people. I was starting to learn about, different languages, different technologies. If I had gone at a startup and worked, in my first term and just kept working at startups, I would have been way more ahead of the track.
Sounds like Pebble's hiring students.
We are.
Yeah, I think I have to echo Eric's point. I mean, like this is a long time ago. This is almost 10 years ago when I was still in school. Working at a startup wasn't like the most prestigious thing. I think that's changed a lot now. There's a lot of great startups, and they're all hiring from Waterloo. And you guys have like an amazing opportunity to go work somewhere where you're going to work on technology that is like leading edge. You're going to have a lot of responsibility, but with that responsibility comes the ability to learn a lot of different skill sets that you're not going to get at a big company where you're isolated on one small big project. At a startup, you have to take on wear multiple hats, take on multiple roles. And for myself, like I wish I had the opportunity to do that early on, so I could learn more that would help me when I start my own company.
Yeah, I can actually see a few Vidyard co-ops in the crowd. Bobby Chan, back from California. You should talk to him about what it's like to work at a startup. Because I think now he's working at a startup in California after spending 4 months with us. And so it's a bit of a chain reaction effect. So you get lots of cool experiences. The thing that I wish I really remembered was, or wish I knew going in, and it worked out for me organically, was that the people that you meet during undergrad, the people that you're doing this hackathon with, the classmates who work on projects with, right from first year, are generally the life partners that you develop. And I don't mean that in like a marriage or any other kind of way. But I actually just recently got married, and before that, my hubby was Devin Galloway, my co-founder. And, we spend pretty much every waking hour together, and we have done that now for probably approaching 10 years. And he's got my back, I've got his, and that relationship isn't something that you can just buy or pick up off a shelf. And so you guys are all aggregating that now. And so make sure you take advantage of this opportunity.
I think the best advice that I probably didn't know before is actually Sam mentioned with Pearl up here earlier, is that don't do a startup for the sake of doing a startup. It's a marathon. It's not this sprint. Like everyone thinks it's an overnight success. I'll just do a startup and we'll sell it to Google or Facebook for $1 billion in a year and be awesome. The reality is it's really hard, and it's going to be this roller coaster of ups and downs. And the thing is that if you're not in it for the right reason, you're really passionate about what you're working on, when you hit those really the down lows and the bad times, you're not going to be able to kind of just keep going and push through because the times get rough and it's hard to do. But if you're really passionate about it and believe in what you're doing, you can kind of power through and just keep on trucking when it gets hard. But I think it's not there if you're in it, just for doing a startup. So I'd say do something you're passionate about.
Could you guys all move your mics up higher? We'll see if that helps.
I think they're like load balancing them or something.
All right, well, you can just talk loudly. This next question is just for Eric. So I want to talk, one thing that you hear a lot is that startups are very hard and go through these dark periods. And before Pebble was the biggest Kickstarter of all time. Is it still the biggest Kickstarter of all time?
Oh, we got passed recently by a really cool cooler that has a margarita maker on top. I'm back.
That sucks. So, Pebble is now this shining jewel of the world of hardware startups. Everyone thinks they're awesome. They're selling tens of millions of dollars a year worth of Pebble. But there was a time when Eric could not raise money. And I want you to just talk a little bit about the period where you were trying to raise money, what was happening to you, and then the Kickstarter and what happened after that.
So we started out here, borrowed some money from my parents, borrowed some money from the OCE. We got accepted into Y Combinator. They were the first institutional investors to invest $18,000 in
It's more now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know. Yeah.
But what and there's a couple things. So one very important thing that I learned is that getting into YC and getting the network with Y Combinator is not this magic button that just generates cash. And I think I kind of I'm pretty honest. I think I probably thought that a little bit coming in. I'm sure a lot of people do. They think gun to YC, I'm made, I'm set. We went through YC. We did 3 months. We tried to raise money after. I was super unsuccessful at raising money. I think my most successful investor meeting was 5 minutes with this guy called Tim Draper. I came in, I showed off the watch, the first watch. He played a little game on it, and then he walked out, and his assistant was like, "Oh yeah, that's it." And I was like, "Okay." That was one of the weirder meetings. And then like a week later, I ping him. I say like, "Hey, are you still interested in investing?" And his assistant's like, "No, I think we'll pass." And then Tim emails back separately, and he's like, "I'm in." That was my most successful investor experience. I met 30 or 40 other investors that all said no, and then no again after I asked them again. But it was very difficult. It was a slog, and it was super kind of depressing because you're doing something that you're not really an expert at. Fundraising, not many people like go to school or even learn how to fundraise. And you also only do it once. These investors are doing it every single day. They have a way bigger advantage at the kind of game than you. So I didn't really know what I was doing wrong. I got some advice, tried to improve. But at the end of the day, I raised maybe $200,000 and then just called it quits. We went back to building the product. We ended up moving from BlackBerry to Android and iPhone. The original watch only worked with BlackBerry.
Does anyone here still have a BlackBerry? Wow.
Welcome to Waterloo.
I mean, I figured if they're anywhere in the world, they would be here.
The biggest breakthrough from us was actually a chat with Paul Graham. I was talking about how difficult it was for us to raise money and how we had already sold $200,000 worth of watches. We thought this was like a big deal, and we had found product market fit. And PG has a really good ability to just bring you right back down to the level where you should be. And he was like, "You're not going to be able to raise money. Is there anything else you can do?" And I was like, "Well, I've been thinking about going on this website called Kickstarter." And he's like, "What's Kickstarter?" And I explained, and then he says, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. You should just do that." And so we dropped fundraising. I had spent a month kind of walking up and down Sand Hill Road, or biking up and down Sand Hill Road.
And 40 people had said no to you.
Yeah, like everybody. And this was even worse than right after YC. After YC, like Tim said yes, and Paul Buchheit said yes. But this time, a year after, when I actually had a prototype Pebble to show off, we took it around and got no traction whatsoever. So we said, screw it, let's just post it on Kickstarter. And that went a little bit better.
And then, did investors after that want to invest?
They did, but we weren't going to take any money at that point. So, yeah.
Right. So this is like this is one of the things you'll learn about investors is they want to invest in already successful companies.
But by that point, you might not.
But at that point, you might not need it.
Them, yeah.
But it gets really frustrating. Okay, same question for you guys. What should Canadian founders do differently, or what do Canadian founders do wrong?
I think you were saying how we should act more like assholes.
Well, that was told to me. I was just repeating that.
Well, often, especially in Waterloo, I think one of the main advantages, especially if you're at Waterloo, is that you get the co-op program, and you get so many experiences as a co-op. And if you take advantage of it, you'll see what it's like working at a startup. But I think the biggest difference between being up here in Canada and being in America is probably the fact that you always think that you're playing little brother to big brother. And I don't think that needs to be the attitude anymore. I think Canada in its own right is one of the leading countries in the world when it comes to higher education. And look around you. There's probably as much talent here as there is anywhere else. When I first came to Waterloo, actually, in my first year here, it was when...
Wasn't that your only year?
I remember that Bill Gates came to speak at Waterloo, and he said that of the 5 or 6 universities that he was visiting on his last tour as a member of Party Stop, he only stopped in Canada here. But he said that Canada is, especially Waterloo, is where he recruits the majority of his new hires. The talent here is so great. So I guess I think the only thing I would say is that look at yourselves, and there's no big difference between where you guys are and what's happening down in America. It's really not that big a difference. Once you understand that, I don't know, that self-realization, I think is pretty
I've got kind of two key points. I think Canadian founders need to spend more time in Silicon Valley. There are facets to Silicon Valley that just don't exist here. There are investors, there's an ecosystem, there's a culture of product development. I think most of us probably have very large Silicon Valley networks because of our time at YC. And it's important that I think every startup gets exposed to that. Because you meet companies who've never been out there, and they definitely have a different ethos about them. The second thing I would say is that Canada can be a little socialist in the way it doles out grants and money for startups. And so companies don't necessarily die as quickly as they do outside of Canada because there's things like SHRED and OCE grants and stuff that you can leverage to keep the candle burning. And the candle should have gone out a long time ago. And what generally happens in the States is these companies burn out and the founders go on and do something else. Whereas here, founders are stuck on the same ideas that aren't getting any traction. They have no semblance of product market fit, but they're still getting money to keep things going. So learn to recognize when your companies are worth killing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, I noticed that as well. 2 points, actually. So the first one is that, well, by the virtue of everybody being here, I don't think you guys think it's weird that you want to start a company. But I remember, like, when I told my parents or whatever, everybody thought it was weird. And I just want to say, like, as Canadians and everybody here, don't think it's weird. It's very normal. Like, if you go down the valley and experience it, it's normal. Everybody does it. It's good to be kind of odd. And I think all the Canadians kind of need to hear that. The second is that I feel like in Canada, like, failure is like a bad word. It's not. Failing is, if you fail and you learn from it and you go on to, improve and do something else, it's good. And I think more companies in Canada kind of need to recognize that.
Quickly down the line, biggest single mistake you've made starting a company?
There's not
too
one.
many.
One that came back to bite me and still continues is figuring out when to trust external partners or consultants or contractors. Pretty often when you're working, you think like, oh, we're only 3 people. We have a little project or we have something else that a partner can do for us or a contractor or a consultant can do. And time again, I get kind of bitten in the ass by like relying on someone outside of the circle of Pebble or the closed-in circle to do something critical for the business, and just to see the process kind of like fall on its face. You have to be very careful about, at the end of the day, you're the one, you and the people that are working with you are the ones who actually care about your product and your startup. It's very difficult to like pay someone enough to care as much as you do about it.
There's too many from us.
One real quick one for me is we had a third co-founder in the business that just wasn't as committed to the program, so to speak, as Devin and I were, and we spent a lot of time trying to change that instead of just moving on. And that was probably 6 months of time where we could have made a quick decision and broken free from that burden.
Biggest single one's a harder question. I'll take the easy way out. We make tons of mistakes, probably every week or every day almost. There's something that we definitely just fucked up and like, didn't make the right choice there. But the point is, being a startup, you don't know all the answers and you make mistakes, but just learning from it and adjusting based on what you've learned is probably the biggest takeaway. You're gonna make hiring mistakes for sure, and like trying to, like fix those as fast as you possibly can is an important thing. You're gonna make mistakes in like partners you choose or really rely on, like Eric said. It happens like every week. We made some big mistake, and what you're going to learn is like they keep happening, and you're going to learn from those, and not make the same mistake again going forward.
I think the mistake that we might have made is that not fixing our mistake fast enough and being scared of like the potential pain of fixing a mistake. Yeah, just eat it. It feels much better after. Like whatever mistake it is.
Cool. All right, I want to make sure we leave enough time for Q&A, so we'll open it up. Hey, Evan, you want to join us for Q&A? Do we have one more mic? I didn't realize Evan was going to be here. Evan is not from Waterloo, but is a YC founder of Teespring, which is an awesome story. And Evan has very unique insights. Teespring is a company that was almost like YC.
never a right time, but it's probably a mistake to wait, in my opinion.
Yeah, like Sam said earlier, like if you want to do something, why not just try it? Especially at the stage where you're at right now, there's like literally no harm.
Yeah, there's not much to lose, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, once you wait and you have all the information, like you miss the opportunity. It's like you're never going to be 100% sure because all the information's there, then like someone else would have already taken it.
I think if you asked anyone up here, everyone would say that one of their biggest wishes was that it would start earlier.
This is a question for Eric. How do you kind of stay relevant with like big companies releasing like Android wear?
how are you going to crush Apple?
How are we going to crush Apple? It's a good question, and it's one that like everyone thinks about. Competitors are, part of the startup ecosystem. Every single company should and probably does have competitors, and if you don't have competitors, you might want to think about that a little bit. In our particular case, we have a very, I think, very interesting and very different path that we're taking onto the wrist. We're not looking about it as like a smartphone sort of crammed onto your wrist and replicating all the functionality. We're thinking about what are the simplest, most useful tasks that Pebble can help someone do on a regular basis and just getting it onto as many people's wrists as possible. Because in reality, what Pebble is a bit of a Trojan horse. It's useful for a couple things, but the key is the ecosystem, the people that are developing apps on top of it. Because when Apple first invented the iPhone, they didn't predict Uber, they didn't predict Spotify, they didn't predict Instagram. They built a really powerful platform and then just kind of set it loose.
What about your ideas made you decide that this is worth taking over your life?
I actually wanted to answer this on the other question about when do you go all in, but I think that the combination of you being really passionate about something and then seeing somebody else out there or groups of people out there who also kind of click with it or who also are ready to even pull out their wallets for it, that's a really powerful thing. I mean, if you really care about something but no one else gets it, that might be a sign that it's not quite the right time to go all in. But when you start seeing other people who are like really excited for that idea to come to fruition so that they can start using it or start paying for it, that's when I think you should go all in on something.
What do you guys think about this basing a start with Waterloo?
So I think two of us have. We've come back from YC and built companies here. We have no issues hiring and retaining technical talent, whereas a lot of our peer companies from our batch have definitely had some issues around that. And operating costs are much, much lower. But it comes with the risk of not having access to capital and appropriate advisory, because in Silicon Valley, there's an infinite number of people who've done what I'm doing already and I can lean on for advisory. Here, it's a narrowing volume as your company grows. And so, the key thing is that you still spend lots of time in the Valley and you still travel there about a week a month, work with mentors and advisors. But again, the potential is huge. We've got, I think, 65 people here now, and Stephen's grown at least that fast in the past year, so it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing. So you gotta have roots in the Valley for sure, but you can be anywhere in the world. It's a small place. Today, I spent about a week a month in the Valley as well myself. We're opening up an office there for like sales, marketing, BD partnerships. As an engineering and like product center, Waterloo is phenomenal for that. Like we have no problem hiring technical talent, both locally and also from all over the world. We've run people from all over Europe, New Zealand, the Valley, back here, Vancouver, etc. But there's certainly like a big lack of very senior like sales, marketing, go-to-market talent that's here. It's just that like New York, San Francisco are the big centers for those. So you got to kind of think about like where you'll find that talent as you scale. But the early day building a product, there's really no better place I could think of in terms of like cost and amount of talent that we can bring in out of the university here.
There's actually one extra perk too, is that you're much closer to English-speaking Europe. And English-speaking Europe likes working with Canadians, but doesn't necessarily like working with Americans. And so So there's a cultural there that you, we just open it up.
So what do you guys think are 3 characteristics that all successful startups have?
Wow. 3 characteristics that all successful startups have.
So link bait.
Oh, here's one that you say pretty often. They're still alive. Like a successful startup, like one of the things that kills a startup is, you know, burning out or stopping or like just giving up on your idea. And I feel like most successful startups still exist. The founders are there. They're present. They're working hard. Yeah. All right. 2 more.
PG once told me when I was negotiating a deal that we ended up closing, whereby the customer said no and basically told me to F off because I was telling them too much. That the negotiation began with no, and so I figured out a different way how to get into that company. And ultimately, the way that solidifies itself is in being relentlessly resourceful, which is an essay that PG wrote, I think a number of years ago now, that everybody here should read, because everything I do now as the CEO of a company that's growing and the evolution of my role is about being as resourceful as humanly possible with my time and people resources inside the company. And the sooner you learn how to leverage those resources in the world around you, the faster you'll succeed.
Anyone want to add a third one?
I would say that a lot of people in this room think a lot about how to build a product and what are good product features and how will your users use it. I think probably more important than all of those are how will you get your product into users' hands. And I think focusing on how you're going to distribute your product or how you're going to just get your product into users' hands is something that a lot of people maybe forget about or is a blind spot to new people building products, and I think that's really important as well.
So I'd say, like, what are some key points or aspects to a good Y Combinator pitch, and how do they differ from like a traditional investor type style elevator pitch?
I am actually very interested to hear these answers myself. What are the key elements of a good YC pitch?
Dude, I don't even remember my YC interview.
It's not a pitch. It's like you're on the defense for 10 minutes straight because you're getting a bunch of questions. And from my interview experience, PG has a tendency to go down a path. And if that's the wrong path and you know it's the wrong path, you got to make sure he doesn't go too far down that path. Because once he gets to the end of that path, there's no going back. And so I interrupted him a bunch to make sure the conversation went in the direction that I knew it needed to go. We had an example of the attention spans for each of the partners' viewing sessions. So we asked them if they watched the video, and they all said yeah, and we showed them that they didn't. I think that was pretty useful as well. And then PG started thinking about the fact that we were kind of using for business, and we went with that idea. But it's not a pitch by any means. We didn't go in with anything prepared. We just went in prepared to answer questions and have some conversation.
In the YC application process, like the application you fill out, I'd cut out any kind of sales, marketing speak out of it. It's people reading it, they're all smart, they're going to see right through that. Just like tell it like it is, plain English, this is what you're doing, this is why, this is the opportunity. Applications I see come through that are very much written about with high level flowery language and so on, it just comes across really badly. So just cut out all that. What you're doing, why you're doing it, why it's important, go from there. I think it's pretty straight up. It's logical.
I would also say know where you're strong and know where you're weak, and that way you can be confident about both, and you can steer the conversation to where you're strong. If you don't know where you're weak and you try to pretend that you're strong where you are weak, that will be very apparent, even if you think you're doing a good job of playing it off. But what you want to do is confidently kind of express that you're weak in that area and steer the conversation towards the places where you're confidently strong in, which is what you're really trying to do.
Yeah, just don't try and bullshit. It's really easy to tell.
Just to echo those 2 points, we are optimists, right? Like we sort of, by what nature of what we do, we want to believe that you are going to be the next stage. We want to believe that this is going to be the next Google. So we're very inclined to be favorable towards you, and we really are. That's the type of people we are. All investors have to be like that. So just help us believe, help us see why this is interesting.
given that I'm sort of like staring it down in the not too distant future, I hope the answer is no.
I'm like 32. I don't know.
Who's seen Logan?
It's over.
So I'll give you my answer on this. There are big advantages and big disadvantages to being on the extreme young end of the founder spectrum. And it's worth knowing what those are, because there are different sort of companies where you're better positioned if you're young, where like, you may as well think about what your strengths and weaknesses are as a founder, and ideally try to start a company that does that. It is definitely true that young people can work harder and just have more stamina and like can work 20 hours a day more easily than people over 30. But it's also true that like the best founders that we've had in general have not been 18 or 19. And so I think it's hard to make like really specific statements about this because so much of it comes down to the individual. In general, younger people probably do found the really important breakthrough tech companies. I don't know if you guys have other things to add.
I don't think it's over like at 30. I just had to get it. I'm starting another company. Like, it can accelerate too. I mean, I think there's examples of this in the real world. Like Elon's like, how old?
43.
He's definitely over 30. So, I mean, I don't think it's over 30. I think age is really just a number that you're just putting on something. I think there are advantages of being young, but there's advantages of experience as you get older as well.
All right, so specifically on that, now I understand the question. One of the things that we see that happens a lot among YC founders is time pressure to start right now, because they see someone younger than themselves starting a company. And in the moment these people get like a lot of press, it sounds really cool, it sounds really glamorous. But they flame out a lot of the times, or like they're starting something they're not really passionate about for the sake of doing it. The people that wait a few years, and especially if you're 22, there's a lot of years left to start a company. It's really worth waiting to do something you really want to do.
I think a real quick point worth making on that is that soon you're going to graduate, and your friends are going to graduate, and they're going to get jobs, and they're going to go out and buy cars and TVs and start building an expensive lifestyle. And I've seen a bunch of friends do that almost wanted to start a company, but went down that path, and then never did, and probably never will, because they elevated their personal burn rate, and they can no longer go back to being ramen profitable or living the lifestyle you currently live as a student, which is a very economically feasible lifestyle. So there's that challenge, but keep your lifestyle in check, and it should be fun.
I'll echo that. This is like one of my famous pieces of advice. So I'm 29 now, and I'm at the age where like a lot of my friends are realizing they're never going to start a startup because they let their, not because they're too old, but because they let their personal burn rate ramp up too high. And they can't go do something uncertain, and they can't not have a salary for a year or two. And I think the thing that matters more than chronological age is just like your life in such a state where you can like take a risk and start something. And that is definitely worth doing at pretty much any age. Yes?
So what are some of the things you should do yourself and learn to do, or what are the things you should hire someone else to do? Should I learn marketing, or should I hire someone to do it themselves?
Hire people to do the stuff that you're not good at. I mean, it's like, I think it's pretty simple. It's not like you should learn to do this and hire people for that. I think you've got to, like, what your strengths are, play them up and focus on those, and the things you're not absolutely amazing at, hire people that are better than you at all those areas. And eventually get to the point in the company where you're hiring people in every area that are going to be better than you at that area. But from day one, like, you want co-founders, you want to hire people that, they complement your weaknesses. I don't think there's a more specific answer. But
I think that depends on how much money you have, though, the money bags. You can hire anybody to do it. But I think in the early days, you have to be a generalist. And the way when I this gigantic dam with a bunch of holes in it, and he and I stand around the dam and figure out whose finger is better at plugging the hole. And one of us put our finger in the hole, and then the other one goes out and finds someone who has a much better finger. We put their finger in the hole, and we go find the next hole in the dam. and it's just the nature of what you do, especially as you're bootstrapping early days.
Slightly contrary opinion. I think it's important to do everything yourself, not hire anyone in the early days, because you need to learn every function of the business. Otherwise, you can't even evaluate if someone else is doing a good job. One of the things that I tell founders is that they need to get good at doing every major function of the business. Good, not great, but You can hire people to replace you later, but hiring someone to do something that you don't understand at all and never understand and never learn doesn't have a wonderful track record. It's really worth trying to learn it yourself. Dave.
So what do you think of hackathons?
What do you think of hackathons?
I wish they existed when I was, I mean,
Yeah.
this magnitude of hackathon existed when I was in school.
Yeah, agreed.
I think if the magnitude of people here, instead of going to weekly hackathons, started building projects and actually technology that changed the world, we'd live in a much better place.
Can it start at a hackathon though?
Right. Pardon me?
Can't those technologies start at a hackathon?
Just don't be a career hackathonist.
Right. I think the hackathons give a really good opportunity for you to meet people, like-minded people, and possibly even find co-founders. I think like it's really hard to find somebody you get along with and you work with and you kind of grind it out with. I think hackathons are a great place to meet like-minded people.
It's a good point. Like some people go to conferences all the time, and you wouldn't want like hackathons to become the conferences. Like conferences are one of these things that like people think they have to go to, especially in like the early days, like to keep busy and to like show your face. No.
Yeah. It can make you feel like you're personally productive, but you might not be as productive as you think you are.
So startups you described as a roller coaster with really high highs and really low lows. How, when you're going through a startup, how do you tell if it's a really low that you're going through, or if it's time to get going on your idea?
How do you know when to quit?
That's like the hardest thing in the world. That's the question.
Have any of us ever quit?
You shouldn't quit. I mean, once you're in, you're in. If it, at some point, you have to just say, look, if it fails, it fails. But otherwise, we're going to keep going. And when it fails is like when you run out of money and like you don't have ramen in your cabinet. You know?
A bit riskier here because you have.
Yeah.
Michael was mentioning earlier. I think you have to be very cognizant of that. But if you kind of filter that out, it's like, would you fail it? Whatever. You might want to take.
It's very hard to know this internally. You're just too close to it. This is one of those times where it's very useful to get an external perspective.
Yes.
Tough thing is though, external people, they won't tell you to quit, and sometimes people will say like, oh, that's an okay idea. Like that's almost worse.
I've told people to quit before.
Well, go talk to Sam.
That's a really hard question to answer, to be honest.
Eric.
There's two Erics. Yeah.
Oh, the dropout. Okay.
Why is Waterloo the worst?
Don't say hate.
I shouldn't say I hate the education system. So the question is, why did I do it? Oh, okay, that's pretty simple. I mean, I'm assuming almost everyone here is you know, probably in the middle of studying for, you know, assignments, or maybe your midterms are coming up soon or whatever. For me, I remember the precise point when I realized that I didn't need to be here anymore, and that was when I was doing a math assignment, and I was at DC, and and you know, I didn't know how to solve one of the problems on my assignment, and I realized that, you know, I'm going to have to read the textbook. Hold on. And I didn't have a textbook, so. So you know what I did was I was at DC, so I decided to, you know, check out the library catalog and see if the textbook was in the library, and it was. So I checked out the textbook, and you know, I flipped to the few pages that were relevant to the assignment. It was a stats assignment, and you know, I read it and I thought about it for a good like half an hour, and I was like, okay, I know how to do it now. Great. And so I wrote my solution, and then I turned the page, and there was another stats problem, and I was like, I don't know how to do this one either. And I was like, well, I should probably read a book or something. So I got up and I went back to the library catalog. And just before I looked up the next book, I said, well, I think this process is going to repeat itself. And I think I've figured out how to learn now. You know, I mean, that was one part. And then the second part was you do a lot of assignments at school. And you know, Waterloo is really good at getting you to think through tough problems. I think everyone would agree that, you know, unless you're really smart, you know, it's not super easy at Waterloo, or probably at UC Berkeley or wherever. But once I figured out that, you know, learning is a process, and you know, you can you know, basically whatever you don't know how to do, you could probably learn it. And when I figured that out, I was pretty confident that I could put myself in any situation and learn my way through. So that was one part. And the second part was just that I had a really hard time convincing my roommate to do a startup with me. And I tried to convince him for an entire year. And I decided by the end of the year that, you know what, I think he's not going to, like, I just don't think, actually he wanted to, but his mom really didn't like me. And so, you know, I spent a year trying to convince him, and Han, if you're here, come on. So I gave up on that dream, and you know, I was looking online, and I found out that, you know, a lot of people go to San Francisco to find their co-founders, and that there's a high probability of success there. So I decided to book a one-way flight to San Francisco to basically do that. And you know, my roommate now, he's a really successful engineer at Google, and I love him. But you know, those are the two things. One, I learned how to learn, and two, I thought I really just needed a co-founder. And those two things really kicked it off for me.
How are we doing for time, Kat? All right, how about 2 more questions then? All right, yes. Is there a correlation between pivots and success? I think it's anti-correlated.
I think Sam would have more data on that.
I think it's anti-correlated. The one big counterexample I can point to is Instagram. What I would say for pivots is that when they work, it's almost always what the founders secretly wanted to be building all along. Made up ideas where founders are like, I have this startup, I have this money, I have this team, what we're doing is not working, we gotta come up with something to do. Those fail at a truly astonishing rate. This comes down to the idea coming before the startup. And a pivot, if a pivot is into a made up idea, it's very unlikely to work. Yes? You. Other than working, how do you guys spend your extra time?
Racing cars.
Bingo.
Really? Biking? Cycling?
Hiking. Triathlon, working out with my lovely fiance.
Woo! All right, that was a short one. How about one more question? Yes? What is the best way to distribute equity among a company?
Equally.
Oh, you mean to like your employees?
Or your co-founders.
Oh, okay.
Wrestling match.
Actually, maybe I could answer this. I have a lot of data. The co-founders that have nearly equal equity splits tend to work out much more often than wildly disparate. And so like at YC, if we see one co-founder has more than twice as much stock as another, that's a problem. And we really like it to be around 50-50. The answer to employees is much more than you think. Most founders, for whatever reason, are very stingy with equity when it comes to their employees and very generous when it comes to investors, and that's exactly wrong. I tell companies that you should try to get like 10% of the company in the hands of the first 10 employees, because then they'll all feel like co-founders. They'll stick around for 5 or 10 years. They'll really help you build this company. But I love it when companies that I'm an investor in, like a later stage investor, I actually have to weigh in on this, ask for really big employee option pools. And I think most companies don't do nearly enough. So we actually have some guidelines at YC that we publish, but the answer is a lot. Okay. I think maybe some of us can stick around for a little while and talk. And thank you guys very much for coming and listening to us.
We wanted to thank our amazing panelists. You guys did amazing. And we also wanted to invite you over to E5 to come check out the hacks. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah.
You're cordially invited. And could you guys just stay on stage? We just wanted to take a quick photo.
somebody should hack a better microphone system or something. Yeah.